Warframe 1999 just released, and with it, the brand new Warframe Cyte-09. And let me tell you, this guy doesn't play around. In fact, Cyte-09 is so strong that he is literally cheating. I mean, he has a wall hack, is constantly invisible, can deal every single elemental damage type in the entire game, and gives huge buffs at the same time. In other words, we need to talk about him. That's why today I'm gonna tell you everything about Cyte-09, his abilities, how to play, yada yada yada, and of course, I have builds. Big shoutouts to all our generous channel members who helped me keep the lights on, and now, let's jump right into it. Okay, the most pressing question right off the bat, where do you actually get Cyte-09 from? Well, as with every Warframe, you can of course just go to the market, buy him pre-built for that sweet platinum, but if you want to farm him regularly, then you gotta first finish the Warframe 1999 quest, which means you have to be done with the entire plotline of Warframe, and then rank up a bit with the Hex Syndicate in the Abandoned Mall, where you can then go to Amir and unlock the main blueprint as well as the 3 component blueprints, and then you just go and build it in your foundry. My personal Cyte-09 has been provided by Digital Extremes themselves as part of the Warframe Creator Program, so big thank you for that. As always, the first thing we gotta talk about with Cyte-09 would be, of course, his abilities, where we start out with his passive. This is really nice. Every time you take out an enemy with a headshot or a quote-unquote weak point kill, you gain plus 1% crit chance, capped at a maximum of plus 300%. This buff lasts for the entire duration of the mission, or if you die, this will of course be reset to 0. This crit chance is additive to crit chance mods, so it's kind of like you mod point strike onto your weapon, and just all in all, it's great. Ability number 1 is called Seek. It feels like cheating, and I'm pretty sure in every other game you would be banned for using something like this, but in Warframe, of course, it is just another Monday. What you do here is you set up an antenna that in a cone in front of it reveals enemies through walls like a wall hack, and it also visually emphasizes the enemy's weak points. You can have up to 3 of those antennas on the field at the same time. However, the main catch here is you can't only see enemies through walls. In addition, your primary and secondary weapons gain 10 fat meters of punch through. You will get plus 70% increased damage to enemy weak spots, meaning in most situations, you're also going to be able to attack those enemies through walls. At first, this sounds like it's absolutely ridiculously overpowered, but then again, compared to what other Warframes can do, it kind of is just like a normal ability, if we're being honest. However, one situation where I could totally see this being a great opportunity would be in disruption missions, where you could identify and attack the incoming demo unit way sooner and more conveniently than it is the case right now. Ability number 2 is called Resupply, and I think this one is probably one of the best abilities in the game. You throw down 2 elemental ammo packs, and when you or an ally picks them up, then the magazine of the weapon that you're currently holding will instantly be refilled, with each and every bullet in that magazine then dealing elemental damage of that element that you threw the ammo pack off. Now, the noteworthy thing here is that this additional elemental damage is not, in fact, an infusion onto the weapon that you have already, like other skills in the game, but instead, it is a separate damage instance that also hits the enemy every time that your weapon hits it. It's kind of like an imaginary multi-shot bullet. This bullet then will deal a certain percentage of the damage that your original bullet would do, double for sniper rifles, and this separate damage instance has a guaranteed status effect. I personally like to think of it as a different version of Zata's Whisper, where instead of having the void damage, you can just select whichever element you want instead. You can hold the ability button to get to this selection wheel right here, where you can select which type of element you want, and the crazy thing here is that Cyte-09 himself can select every single elemental damage type in the game except Tau and Void. So that is some crazy variety right here. Now, to be fair, usually you build for one element against the one enemy faction you're up against, but if I imagine, for example, the Profit Taker fight, where the orb constantly changes the vulnerability to different elements, I think Cyte-09 is going to be the #1 frame to fight it. Ability number 3 goes by the name Evade, and this is probably Cyte-09's #1 survivability tool. Similar to Ash, you become invisible for a short period of time. However, unlike Ash, you can extend this invisibility period by taking out enemies with headshots. Now, the catch here is that this skill is not instantly reusable, so if for whatever reason your invisibility runs out, then you have to wait for a certain period of time until the cooldown is over. It's basically a commitment, an all or nothing type of situation. The skill also heals you a little bit, which can be nice with certain mod interactions, and this is the big part, it's Cyte-09's helmet ability, so if you use this, you can now make any Warframe in the game invisible. Isn't that crazy? And finally, Cyte-09's big ultimate ability is called Neutralize, where he summons the Neutralizer, which is his Exalted sniper rifle. First of all, this sniper rifle does have some group clearing capabilities, because if you land a headshot or a quote-unquote weak point hit, then those bullets ricochet to nearby enemies' weak points, so you can take out multiple with just one shot. With the alt fire, you can shoot a cold grenade that freezes enemies, which is definitely nice. And with that being said, let's check out the weapon statistics. Okay, the Neutralizer. What do we have in terms of weapon stats? This is a semi-automatic, slow-firing sniper rifle with a nice 2.5 innate punch-through. In terms of stats, it is pretty much what you would expect, with a very high 45% crit chance at a 3x multiplier. However, the status chance is not all that high, and you probably don't want to build for that. As for the alternate fire, we do have a high crit chance, but no status whatsoever, so the only status we would be inflicting are the force proc cold effects from its special ability, and in general, I would say don't really go and mod for the radial attack, rather focus on the direct hit damage. Don't worry, we're gonna go over how to mod this in specific later in the build section. Oh, and by the way, as always, if you could maybe drop the video a little like, that would be super nice because it helps me big time with the YouTube algorithm, so cheers so much for your support. But now that we're done with the skills and you know what his abilities are, let's, before we jump into the build, quickly talk about how you might want to actually play Cyte-09 in practice. Now, first and foremost, in order to survive, especially in higher enemy levels, you want to make sure to be invisible as often and as long as possible. So get the invis going and make sure that it doesn't run out. In terms of damage dealing, Cyte-09 is a pure gun runner, either by using his exalted weapon or by using another weapon of your choice and replacing his fourth ability with something else from the helmet. And that means that all your damage is naturally going to come from your weapons. Meaning, A, you want to make sure to stack your passive up as fast as possible, so get those weak point kills, and also make sure to always use your second ability with the elemental ammo to make sure you're constantly rocking whatever the enemy faction you're up against is weak to. Finally, spam your pillars as often as possible so that you cover the majority of the area where enemies are coming from, even if they're not behind walls, but if they get scanned by those pillars, you still get that juicy damage bonus against them. Okay, now before we jump into the build section, there is one more thing that I want to talk about regarding his elemental ammo, and that is which types of weapons you actually want to choose when you play with him, and which weapons are to be avoided. See, I was thinking about mentioning this in the abilities section early in the video, but because Cyte-09 was just released and usually, there tend to be some bugs here and there, at the point of recording, I'm not yet sure how much of what I'm about to say is actually a feature and what might just be a bug. Let me tell you what I mean. At first glance, the second skill is very straightforward. You get elemental ammo, you can use it with your weapon, and that's it. However, what the skill doesn't tell you is that apparently this elemental ammo does not work on the Incarnon mode on Incarnon weapons. It does not work on weapons that have a recharging magazine, like for example the Fulmin. It doesn't work on weapons with infinite ammo, like the Nataruk. So it only works on quote-unquote normal type of weapons. Also, and I'm pretty sure that this is a bug that's going to be fixed, the amount of extra damage that this additional damage instance from the ammo deals, according to the ability description, is scaling with the ability strength. However, when I run my tests here, no matter how high I put my ability strength, the damage just remains the same, and I don't know what's going on here, but I'm pretty sure that this is something that's gonna be fixed. Another thing that I want to say is, because of the fact that this is another instance of damage, I was kind of hoping that it would work like Toxic Lash from Saren, in that you can actually triple and quadruple dip damage over time with faction damage, and I'm not definitely saying it does not work like that. However, in my testing, it did not really seem like it was as strong as Toxic Lash. So I'm just gonna say I assume there's no triple and no quadruple dipping happening right here, but over the upcoming days and weeks, I'm pretty sure we're gonna get a definite answer on that. Have you already noticed some other weird things with this ability? If yes, then let me know in the comments down below. Alright, with all that being said, let's finally get into the chapter that you've all been waiting for, that being the builds. In this video, I have two slightly different builds prepared for you. One is the quote-unquote general build that is focused on playing Cyte-09 with a normal weapon, where we're not going to use its Exalted sniper, but rather something else from the helmet in that slot. And then the second build is focused on his Exalted sniper as our main weapon, where we're going to use his whole kit. Let's start out with the general build first, and let me just say that Cyte-09 is a very new frame, and I'm sure there are more synergies and more ideas that are gonna be revealed in the upcoming days and weeks. This right now is the best that I came up with day one, so look at it with a grain of salt. But now, here we go. Because Cyte-09 can be constantly invisible with his third ability, that is the main source of survivability, which is why I didn't mod for anything in that regard. In the aura, I went with Combat Discipline that gives us a little bit of self-damage every time we take out an enemy, which is important to trigger our first Arcane, that being Arcane Avenger for that big juicy crit buff. And yes, before you roast me in the comments again, I am aware that Arcane Avenger does also trigger on shield and not only on health damaged, but if you're invisible, your shield also doesn't get damaged, so Combat Discipline is the only way here. Also, because of the fact that the third skill heals us with every kill, we're going to use Archon Intensify, which then gives us plus 60% ability strength, which is very nice. And speaking of ability strength, we want to have quite a lot of that to increase the extra damage from our elemental ammo, as soon as that is hopefully fixed, as well as the extra weak point damage that our first gives us. So, beyond the Archon Intensify, we're also going to go for Transient Fortitude, Blind Rage, as well as Power Drift. For the energy economy, we go with Arcane Energize, and then in general we want to have a healthy mix of duration so that our invisibility is easy to keep up, as well as range for the scanning function from our first ability. That's why we go with Continuity. You could go Archon, you could go Primed, depends on your personal preference and what you're doing with the helmet. For the duration, we go with Narrow-Minded, and then for the range, we have Stretch, Augur Reach, as well as Overextended, which might be a little bit of an overkill just for his first ability. However, in this build right here, I replaced his 4 with Ensnare from Korra to group up enemies, which I find is a very nice addition to this kit, so that is why I went with 3 ranged mods. Now, there is one more thing that I want to mention for continuity and stretch. You could go here and use the Archon versions, however, that strongly depends on which helmet skill you use, because Toxin and Electricity status effects triggered with your Elemental Ammunition skill on normal weapons do not trigger these Archon mods. This only works with your Exalted Sniper. As for the Archon shards, I went with 2 Tau Forged Blues in order to not have to use a flow mod for the maximum energy, as well as 2 red ones for more ability strength, and finally a purple one to get the extra plus 30% electricity damage on primary weapons. Now, why did I use that? Well, in order to understand that, we need to take a look at the second build, that being the one focused on the Exalted Sniper Rifle. So much for the general quote-unquote gun runner build. Let's now take a look at what you want to use if you actually go for the Exalted Sniper Rifle, which is very strong by the way. And here a lot stays the same, but some things also change. First of all, just like with the normal build, the Combat Discipline Arcane Avenger Archon Intensify combination remains the same because it gives us more ability strength and that nice crit buff. Also, we go for a lot of strength again with Blind Rage, Transient Fortitude, Power Drift. However, this time we don't need Arcane Energize for reasons that I'm gonna get into in a minute here. Instead, we're gonna use one of the brand new Arcanes that came with Warframe 1999, and that is Arcane Crepuscular. I hope I pronounced that right. Right now, I obviously still have it at rank 0, but once you have it at max rank, what it does is, while you're invisible, which we are all the time, you gain plus 30% ability strength as well as a plus 3 times final crit damage multiplier. This is tailor-made for Cyte-09, and I can imagine it's going to be incredibly strong once you have it at rank 5. Definitely would prefer this one over Mold Augmented or Arcane Ice Storm in this slot. Next, for the range, we go for Overextended as well as Archon Stretch, because, remember, we have that purple Archon shard, which puts electricity on primary weapons, aka our Exalted Sniper, that does count as a primary weapon, but it also counts as a skill, meaning if it triggers an electricity status effect, which is coming from the Archon shard, then that triggers Archon Stretch, and therefore we regain energy. That is very nice. Also, I'm going for Archon continuity instead of Prime continuity for the duration, because this one gives you a corrosive status effect whenever you trigger a Toxin one, meaning if you choose Toxin Ammunition, then you deal Toxin and Corrosive at the same time with that hit, which is another nice interaction. This right here would be the full build, and you might be wondering, should we use a Helmint ability here? And I personally would say there is absolutely no need to. His kit, when you use the Exalted Sniper, is really very good. But if you wanted to, one thing that I tried and that worked very well for me is using Nourish in his first slot, which gives you another element on top, that being viral, plus it helps big time with the energy economy. However, let's now finally take a look at how to build the Exalted Sniper itself, and this one is relatively interesting. Because it is an Exalted weapon, we don't have access to weapon arcanes and also no Exiles mods. That's why our base damage also comes from one of the brand new mods, that being Spectral Serration, giving you plus 330% base damage while invisible, very nice synergy with Cyte-09, as well as another new mod called Primary Acuity that gives you plus 350% weak point damage and plus 300% weak point crit chance, however it blocks you out from using multi-shot. I still went with this one because it sounds pretty darn cool. Up next, of course, we go crit chance, crit damage, since this is such a high crit weapon, a faction damage mod, Galvanized Aptitude, which does work, although I'm not yet sure if it's additive or multiplicative. And then finally, I went and put Blast onto the weapon, because more different damage types is always amazing for Galvanized Aptitude, and Prime Cryo rounds is a whole lot of damage, so that made sense. However, and this is also a great idea, there's a mod called Sharpshooter that gives you energy every time you get a headshot kill with your sniper. This would also be a great option if you want to trade in that little bit of damage for much more energy economy on your Cyte-09. And lastly, please do not use heavy caliber on this one because the accuracy penalty hurts a lot here. And this right here then would be the full build the way that I have it right now. In case you just returned to Warframe after a longer hiatus, then don't miss my returning player's guide right here, and also make sure to leave a sub because I have lots more 1999 vids in the making, so welcome to the crew. Another massive shout out to Niels V, Demon Lord Zell, Demon Emperor, Emperor Prime, Nostlinux Gaming, Turtlepeer, Lycon Shepherd, Ondakani02, Pepperwolf, Streamjet21, SynapKing 5000, Mihawk HE, Yagis, Hockey Hunter, Noob Phoenix, and all other generous channel members for your continuous support. We see each other, hopefully in the next one, and until then, as always, good loot.